This is our presentation on Italy and Czechoslovakia by Marissa, Emily, Mara, Karen, and Harshini. Some background on Italy is that during the war they were involved in the Triple Alliance with Germany and Austria-Hungary. However, they remained neutral until quickly joining with the Entente. The main reason for siding with the Entente was their want to fight with Austria-Hungary. Approximately 460,000 were killed and 955,000 were wounded. The main treaties that Italy was involved in was the Treaty of London and the Treaty of Versailles. These will be further delved into the next slides.
There were pros and cons in Italy that came after the treaties. They were created after World War I. There were two main treaties that were focused on, like the Treaty of Versailles, as stated by Emily, and the Treaty of London. One pro would be from the Treaty of Versailles. Italy was given a permanent spot in the League of Nations. This allowed the country to share their opinions and decisions on disputes amongst other countries. Also, Italy got a share of money from German reparations. The money allowed them to circulate the money around the country, which ensured that the people of the country is receiving the money and no strikes against the government occurs like the strikes in Russia. Another pro that came from the Treaty of London was that Italy was granted the ability to annex South Tyrol after the war and take over the administration. Countries like France, Britain, and Russia did this to get Italy into the war. They promised them land so Italy can spread their power. As for the cons, the secret Treaty of London did not ensure that Italy got their land. Also, Italy lost many soldiers during the war, and Italy had to pay off some of the war debts and damages made by the Allied powers.
The majority of the Italian public was very upset and felt betrayed by the treaties. They felt that 460,000 Italians had died for very little gains, almost nothing, and they were firmly against the united Yugoslavia, since part of the land that was inside the borders of the new Yugoslavia was land that they were promised. After the signing of the Treaty of Versailles, many Italian nationalists were furious, and they set up protests as a result. Many fascists, including Benito Mussolini, used public anger to further their political causes, Mussolini being a war veteran himself. Extreme nationalist and poet Gabriele D'Annunzio coined the term mutilated victory, which represented the views of the Italians of the treaties. There was a group of more moderate politicians led by Leonida Bisolati, pictured in the right, who wanted to avoid the rise of irredentism, which is the idea that all Italian-speaking nations should be governed by Italy. But this idea wasn't very popular with the public, and it wasn't very useful in Italia's politics.
By the end of the war, Italy was left in humiliation politically due to the Allies being unwilling to honor the promises of the treaty and grant the requested rewards. The territory could also not be given due to conflicts with self-determination with other nations, such as the South Slav and Yugoslav peoples. The uncharted territory of the new nation's independence challenged Italy's pride, which may have further triggered social and political unrest. The country was experiencing severe tensions throughout the days of negotiations from the radical movement of right-wing nationalists who threatened a civil war if demands were not met. Ironically, the Paris peace conferences, which were meant to unite European nations, resulted in Italy's departure from negotiations several times. Italy's vulnerability worsened their position internationally, and when the Treaty of Versailles was signed, Italy received a seat in the League of Nations, which technically restored some of its international reputation, and they also received territory through the Treaty of Saint-Germain. The aftermath of the treaties consisted of more severe protests, bitter resentment towards the Allies and the US, and political conflicts within the government, which all essentially foreshadowed Benito Mussolini's future government.
So the treaties could have been made more palatable by mainly revising the Treaty of London, as it was the root of the problem. The Allied powers lacked an awareness of how weak Italy's army was, and this ultimately led to the downfall of Italy overall. If the Allied powers had promised less land in exchange for putting Italy in less dangerous situations in part of the battle, it would have been much easier for Italy to succeed both in their part and also receive the land. The Treaty of Versailles was a problem because Italy had not been given any of the land it was promised in the Treaty of London, so an easy way to solve this would have been to give Italy more of the land promised. However, this is not a very realistic solution, and so a more realistic solution would be to just treat Italy with more compassion and understanding during negotiations in Paris, as many of the country leaders within the negotiations were very rude to Italy and did not consider any of the troubles it had been through.
Here's some background information for Czechoslovakia. Around 1 million fought for the Austro-Hungarian Empire, while others fought in Russia, France, Italy, and Serbia, which were known as the Czechoslovak legions. They fought for the Allied nations in pursuit of an independent Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia was officially formed by the end of World War I after the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire in 1918, and the Treaty of Saint-Germain recognized its independence, while the Treaty of Trianon defined the borders of the state.
Czechoslovakia received a lot of gains from these treaties, the first being that Czechs and Slovaks were granted self-determination after being under Austrian rule for 300 years. In the Treaty of Saint-Germain in 1919, the Allies formally recognized Czechoslovakia, as Karen said, as an independent and sovereign country, as well as giving them lands such as Bohemia, Moravia, and Austrian Silesia. In 1920, in the Treaty of Trianon, Ruthenia was also added to the country, which is seen in the right. The major con of these treaties was that the German-speaking minority in Bohemia and Moravia lacked self-determination, and they were under the Czechoslav rule.
As for the perspectives and positions, we'll be focusing on the perspectives and positions of each piece of land gained. Bohemia and Moravia were the German-speaking areas gained, and so those living there were a bit agitated and did not positively receive this at first, but overall, things ended up going smoothly and it was positive and good. Traxton caused tension with Poland as both countries wanted a piece of land. However, Czechoslovakia won the larger and economically better western portion, which once again was very positive for Czechoslovakia. Finally, the gaining of the Slovaks from Lithuania was extremely valuable as they had similar cultures and spoke the same language, but had different experiences which allowed for the development of both. So overall, Czechoslovakia was very, very pleased with the end result of all of the treaties that had been in, as it was able to receive independence and also gain land.
The political impact and significance of Czechoslovakia and their treaties is that as they were given independence from a broken Austria-Hungary and Germany was compelled to renounce territorial claims, they were led to create a democratic constitution based off of the French Third Republic. The significance of gaining Bohemia, Moravia, and Austrian Silesia is that by around 1918, Bohemia and Moravia had around 80% of the industry of Austria, and the amount of Germans living in Bohemia continuously increased, which is more significant around the time of World War II. The significance of the addition of Ruthenia is that it would give the arguments of Czech diplomats more power to their words at the Paris Peace Conference, and Ruthenia wanted its own independent state before joining Czechoslovakia. However, by May 1919, Czechoslovak troops had occupied a decent portion of Subcarpathian Ruthenia, and the local leaders of Ruthenia were now in support of unification.
There are two main changes that could have made Czechoslovakia more palatable. When the Treaty of Saint-Germain allowed Czechoslovakia to create their own government, economic support should have been included in that treaty. This would have helped them start their own government. It would also help them jumpstart their economy and start trading with other countries. Countries can help them by providing them with exports that include food and staple products. This would ensure that the country is receiving living necessities like food and supplies. This would have also increased employment rates by adding more jobs in factories to produce technology that was advancing during World War I. This is important because Czechoslovakia would be able to grow as a country and provide other countries with advanced technology. Another thing that should have been added are the agreements between countries and their border conflicts. Disagreements and conflicts broke out between the countries Poland and Czechoslovakia. The Polish-Czechoslovak War took place in a town which is now counted as a Polish town. It's called Cieszyn Silesia. The Treaty of Saint-Germain should have addressed which country got this town to prevent the war from occurring. These are our sources. Thank you.